This is your 28storms.com tropical weather update for Thursday, September 22nd. Although Tropical Storm Ophelia is highly disorganized, maximum sustained winds are still 65 miles per hour. It's moving off toward the west at now 13 miles per hour, and a gradual turn to the northwest is anticipated by the National Hurricane Center. They take the center of circulation just to the northeast of the Virgin Islands by 8 a.m. on Sunday. The good news is that even if the center were to pass over the Leeward Islands, the bulk share of tropical storm force winds continue to be northeast of the center due to southwest wind shear. The latest model tracks are in general agreement with the official forecast. However, I do think that this system could be a little bit weaker than anticipated over the next 48 to 72 hours. Therefore, the center of circulation could pass a little bit to the south of the majority of these model tracks, and it may be a little bit closer to the latest UK Met model forecast. Based on the latest satellite trends, I find it hard to believe that Tropical Storm Ophelia will be able to maintain its current intensity. The surface circulation is becoming more exposed by the hour, and you can see on the infrared that all of the convection is off toward the northeast, and if the convection becomes too detached from the center, then eventually the system may lose nearly all of its convective activity. And this is all because we have continued southwesterly wind shear, but not only that, notice how dry the atmosphere is just to the west of the tropical storm. The models are maintaining Ophelia's intensity throughout the next 3 to 5 days. However, I find this very hard to believe. The models are also showing this mid to upper level trough continuing to amplify over the central Atlantic, and this is only going to enhance the southwest wind shear and dry air. And frankly, I really do not foresee how this system will be able to survive as a tropical storm. In fact, I still think that this is going to end up dissipating over the next 96 hours, but the jury is still out on that. So interests in the Northeast Caribbean are advised to continue monitoring the system's progress, but even if the center passes directly over your locale, it will more than likely do so in a significantly weakened state, and I really don't expect much more than elevated rain chances toward the second half of this upcoming weekend. Interests here in Bermuda are also advised to keep a close watch on the system. However, it is 5 to 6 days away, and overall the impacts would still be fairly minimal even if this system did pass fairly close to you. Quickly turning to the eastern Pacific and Hurricane Hilary, maximum sustained winds have been increased to 85 miles per hour, so this is a Category 1. It's moving off toward the west-northwest at 10 miles per hour. It looks like the inner core is going to remain just to the south of the Mexican Riviera. However, some of those outer bands are likely to cause some tropical storm force wind gusts right along the coastline. And the 5-day forecast does take this into the open waters of the eastern Pacific, but as noted in the Hurricane Center discussion, there is quite a lot of model variance as we go into days 4 and 5. Some of the models have this trying to recurve a little bit closer to the Baja Peninsula, whereas some of the other models take this more out to sea. This is a look at the hurricane force winds and how far they extend outward. But it's a really small area. The tropical storm force winds extend much more toward the north, but still they're just off the coastline. And once again, there is a chance we could see some tropical storm force winds along this area. The models are fairly consistent with regards to the track over the next 72 hours, but here is some of that model variance, with some of the tracks turning more toward the north and the other tracks remaining well to the southwest. Hurricane Hilary is becoming more organized by every passing hour. In fact, it looks like this is going to make a run at becoming a major hurricane, possibly as early as within the next 24 to 36 hours. We have a ragged eye-like feature beginning to develop within the middle of the central dense overcast. You can even begin to make out that eye and the surrounding eye wall on the latest enhanced infrared. Now, the Hurricane Center discussion also noted this large blob of convection located just to the west of the system, and it was a little bit uncertain as to what impact that would have on the intensity, but so far it really doesn't appear to be disrupting the overall structure of the hurricane all that much, and that convective blob should eventually diminish over the next 24 hours. So this should have a free window to develop into a major hurricane, and it's more than likely going to max out as a Category 3, but a Category 4 is certainly within the odds of possibility. As we see, there's a very good moisture envelope, and there's really not much in the way of any wind shear at this time. This was a microwave satellite pass of Hurricane Hilary taken late this morning, and yet you can already begin to see the eye wall-like feature begin to develop, and a small eye already beginning to pop out here on some of the latest imagery. This is a look at the regional water vapor for the area out ahead of Hurricane Hilary, and the main steering parameters will be a subtropical ridge currently located near the Baja Peninsula. Some of the models have this ridge beginning to retrograde more toward the west as a trough over the southwest United States begins to carve out northern Mexico. So there is a slight chance that this could turn more so into that weakness, or it could remain to the south of that ridge and continue moving off toward the west. This is the latest 12Z run of the GFS model. Notice that it gradually takes Hurricane Hilary off toward the west-northwest. It's really not seeing the hurricane being turned by the trough to the north just yet, but keep in mind that the GFS is really not seeing the full intensity of this hurricane. So far it only thinks that we're dealing with a minimal tropical disturbance, and that is certainly not what we have out there. Obviously on the satellite you saw that this is organizing into what is more than likely going to be a major hurricane within the next day or so. So that forecast from the GFS is in some question here. And as far as Tropical Storm Ophelia, somehow it maintains the storm's intensity, but it also keeps it well to the northeast of the Caribbean. And by day 5 through day 7, it's making a slow approach in the general direction of Bermuda, whereas the rest of the Atlantic basin is forecast to be quiet. Turning to the 12Z run of the Canadian CMC, it is handling Hilary in much the same way that the 12Z GFS is doing, but notice that it's still keeping this hurricane far too weak. We're dealing with a much stronger system than many of the models are currently indicating, and that could have some significant influences on the overall forecast track. If it were to somehow stay as weak as many of the models are showing, then it would be more prone to being stuck underneath that subtropical ridge and eventually continuing more toward the west and out to sea. However, if it continues to strengthen into a significant hurricane, it will have the tendency to feel the effects of that trough coming down from the north a little bit more. Thus, the odds of recurvature closer toward the Baja Peninsula would be heightened. I will show you the 12Z European forecast for the Eastern Pacific in just a moment, but first with the Atlantic, we see that by 24 and 48 hours the model is still anticipating Tropical Storm Ophelia to maintain its current intensity, but look by day 3, the model is beginning to sniff out some of that strong southwest wind shear, and therefore it's showing significant weakening as it begins to make its closest approach to the Northeast Caribbean, and by day 4, we probably don't even have a classified tropical cyclone by this point, and by day 5 it's beginning to turn toward the northwest along the western periphery of the subtropical Atlantic ridge, and that's thanks to that large cutoff area of low pressure, or at least low heights just to the south of the Great Lakes. And by day 6 it's trying to make a little bit of a comeback here. We see that the pressure is beginning to lower once again, and that is the reason why Bermuda is going to have to keep a close watch on this system. And finally, this is the 12Z ECMWF forecast, or the 500 millibar forecast for the Eastern Pacific. And before we go through these maps, I would like to apologize for the map quality. The available model guidance from the ECMWF is quite limited, at least online for the Eastern Pacific region. But as we go into 24 hours, this is the overall position of where the hurricane is expected to be. By 48 hours, it's continuing to move toward the west-northwest. Notice that we have this 500 millibar ridge located just to the northwest of the hurricane. But by 72 hours, notice that that ridge is beginning to retrograde more toward the west, and we're beginning to see a little bit more troughiness here over southern California and southern Arizona. And then by day 4, notice that this trough is trying to deepen just a little bit more, and it really wouldn't take much for this hurricane to be steered more toward the north into that trough, and that is going to have to be something that we have to keep a very close watch on for all interests in the southern Baja Peninsula. And finally, by 120 hours, we can see this even more apparently. The hurricane and trough connection is trying to be made here, and we're going to have to take a very close look at this, and we will reevaluate the pattern in tomorrow afternoon's model guidance. So please stick with 28storms.com. We will have updates on Tropical Storm Ophelia and Hurricane Hilary throughout this upcoming weekend. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our Facebook page and the YouTube channel so you can keep up with all of our latest updates. And once again, if you're on the go, don't forget to check out the Hurricane Tracker app that is available on the iPhone and iPad.